IU fans, Mike Pegram and Jeff Rabjohns here live from Bankers Life Court, where we just watched a tremendous game, maybe the best game that Indiana has had in a long time, for us, thrilling and victory when it was unexpected. An overtime win, 80-77 over Notre Dame. Jeff, just immediate thoughts from this classic.
Well, I think a couple of things stand out right away. First of all, Indiana's fight. They were down 14 at one point in the game. They were down about 8 points with a little more than 2 minutes left, and they were able to fight back and get the victory. So I think IU's fight really stands out. Obviously, as far as players go, two guys who really jump out the most, Jajuan Morgan. He has 34 points and 11 rebounds. Bonzie Colson, a preseason All-American, has 29 and 11. So that tells you a little bit about the competition that Morgan was facing and the level at which he played. So I thought he was tremendous. Zach McRoberts getting 9 rebounds, 7 offensive, and certainly the big one that gave IU the actual lead. And then the other thing I thought stood out was Robert Johnson found his shot. He went 5 for 10 from 3. Didn't have a great first half, obviously, but he stayed with it, was able to find his shot, and I think some of those were enough that kept Notre Dame from being able to really, try to double down on Jajuan or things like that. He hit just enough, and I thought he had a really good game overall.
It must be the first game I can remember in a couple of years where throughout the contest I'm thinking Indiana's not going to win this game. They're down for the last 30 minutes.
Right.
I don't know if they ever led until overtime, except for those first 9 or so minutes. Was that your feeling throughout, that this was Indiana wasn't quite going to get over the hump?
Well, I don't know. It was kind of a game where, even though IU wasn't playing well, once it got to 28-14 and it didn't get away from them, I thought, okay, they're at least going to have enough fight to stay in it. I think the question was, were they going to be able to get over the hump? They had plenty of fight against Duke, didn't get over the hump. They had plenty of fight at Louisville, didn't get over the hump, and obviously shooting from 3 in the second half of the Louisville game was the story there. But they had the fight where you looked at it and you said, okay, they are at least giving themselves a chance. They defended really well. I thought they defended very smartly. They handled themselves on the boards. Even though Bonzie Colson got 29 points, they made him work for it, and they didn't have to pull guys off of other people to try to do too much with Bonzie. And once Zach McRoberts was able to give them more length, they kind of had that hybrid lineup a little bit. And once that hybrid lineup started being effective, I at least had the sense that, okay, this might get interesting. I didn't know if they would win, but I thought this might get interesting.
Yeah, they got it done with Deron Davis not really providing much except for one big overtime basket. But having Deron on the bench, maybe you're getting with that hybrid lineup, is it allowed a lot of space for Jajuan Morgan to work. And he was a matchup problem throughout the game for Notre Dame. And Jajuan has really blossomed, and a lot of guys don't normally follow Indiana. We were talking about it throughout the game. What's making him such an effective scorer in the post when maybe you didn't see that too often his first couple years?
Yeah, some of the post-game questions were kind of funny for those of us who've seen him a lot, especially like you and I saw him in AAU, and there were people asking about him being able to dribble and get in the post. And I'm thinking, he did that for Mocan Elite when they played PSA Cardinals, which had Thomas Bryant, Sheck Diallo on the front court. I was like, we've seen this before, not at this level, and he's certainly gotten much, much better. And I think IU's gotten better at feeding him. But the area on the floor in which he's able to function very well in the interior is something that that's known territory to him. And I think his footwork has gotten so much better, because his footwork used to be a little sloppy. He would go way too wide or try to turn too quickly. And now it's much more sophisticated with his footwork, especially if you watch some of the things, you slow him down, where he catches it, when he picks it up, how he goes through people's shoulders. But it was kind of interesting. I think maybe nationally, there were some people here. I think there are going to be some stories about this is Jajuan's coming out party. So that's good for Jajuan, but it was kind of interesting to hear those questions, I thought.
Yes. My answer was that he's, the footwork, I think he's got tremendous agility, and I think he has a really nice ability to flip his wrist and get the right English on the ball, too. That move he made down over here in overtime, or I don't know if it was in overtime or late, to help force overtime, where he was at really a difficult angle and flipped it up off the corner of the glass and in. You just don't see many players that can finish that play, and he's got a knack for that. I think Archie made a good point that he's moving towards the basket, not backing away. A lot, a finesse player, the traditional issue is he's moving back away from the basket. Jajuan's got good, solid strength, and as a junior now is kind of physically developed. And my other point to some of the guys here was you got to remember he had really bad shoulder issues the first half of his career here.
Right.
The first year he was in a sling half the season, and the second year he had no off season because he was recovering from that shoulder injury, and he was also playing with Thomas Bryant, which takes away those post looks. But now he's added some weight, he's got a good shoulder, and he's had a good off season. A lot of things have kind of come together for him.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the shoulder issues, because they really kind of stymied not only his progress, but just time on the court to get accustomed to trying to be able to do some things. But I do think Archie Miller's point about him not fading away and going toward the basket and going through contact was really big, because obviously, space is a shooter's best friend, especially if you're on the perimeter. Can you create space to get off your shot? And sometimes guys who operate in the mid-range, they would rather go into a guy than lean back and feel the space to where it's a comfortable shot. And it is a learned thing, or something maybe you've done in the past. You have to learn to do at this level, which is what I think the case is with Jajuan. But he when he does have the space on the inside, he does have the right confidence. And that was a word that Notre Dame coach Mike Bray used several times. Said he's a confident young man. You can see his confidence, and he is playing that way. And he's going through guys. He's going toward the basket. He's going up through contact. And I think the way in which he's attacking and not falling away, not trying to create space, but trying to go through the contact, through the defender's shoulder and up, I think that's really helping him.
I was surprised that Mike Bray did not go with a double team at some point when he was getting Jajuan was scoring on almost every possession. I thought it was a great fitting finish in terms of Zach Roberts getting the offensive rebound in addition to Morgan, and then kind of the decisive part of the game.
Yeah. I mean, two guys who had made a number of important plays were the two guys who made the important play. There's a miss first of all, I thought IU did a really smart thing. They went quick down three to Jajuan Morgan. And I was sitting next to Terry Hutchins, and he's like, who's going to take the three? And I said, McRoberts is on the floor. That tells me they're going quick to JMO. And he was like, you're crazy. And I'm like, look at the lineup and look at who's likely there. But they go quick. He gets a score, gets a foul, misses the free throw. But Zach McRoberts gets probably the biggest rebound of his basketball life to this point. I mean, he had some big ones in Carmel State title games, but certainly this is a little different level. But the two guys who were the most important guys, I thought, for Indiana for the game were the two guys who made the key play at the end.
And, of course, Robert Johnson finally started hitting some jump shots, threes, and ended up with 20 or so for Indiana. It just makes it so much of a difference. Now, Robert had some issues with the turnovers today, 6 turnovers, but just having the ability to stretch the floor on the opposing team's defense, that wasn't there at Louisville, and it happened tonight or this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. And you got a guy who's out there, and you look at, okay, he's got 20 points, in 43 minutes. When you start to get to a point, about a point every 2 minutes, it's pretty solid offensive production. But the big thing was the 5 for 10 from three. His career high in made threes is 6, so he was one off of that. He hit some really important ones today for Indiana.
And I was surprised that they were able to withstand, not only Duran's off game, but Josh Newkirk. I don't know if he even scored today. It was limited because of foul trouble. No points in nine minutes. It's not a deep team, so you're always surprised when they're able to overcome a starter or two who's not, for whatever reason, doesn't have a big game. Any additional thoughts before we let go? We got a quick turnaround here for Fort Wayne.
Sure.
You think that'd be a game that Indiana would be up for, even with the short window, because of what happened last year?
Yeah, I think the way the players talked about it, they didn't talk in depth about it, but just the brief comments that they made about they remember last year. I think they're going to come out very prepared for that, because I think the guys who were on the team last year who played in that game, I think they felt embarrassed, that they're Indiana and they went to a mid-major, and supposed to be kind of like IU taking IU basketball on the road to Fort Wayne, the state's second biggest city, and all of a sudden they lose to IPFW. So I think those guys were stung by that, and I think they still feel that, and I would certainly expect them to be ready for that game and not come in like, oh hey, we just beat Notre Dame, we can take care of Fort Wayne. I think Fort Wayne is a different image in their minds because of what happened last year.
Yeah, I think they're missing Bryson Scott this year. Some things have changed year over year. The final thing I wanted to say was the win is really important in terms of postseason. This
Sure.
is a team that would have been 5-6. Now it's 6-5, with 3 games they'll be favored in. They could be heading into the last 16 games of the Big Ten with a 9-5 record. That lends itself to hope. Let's say Indiana goes 10-8 with a 9-5. I guess that works out to 19-13 going into the Big Ten tournament. So you get 1 win there, you got 20 wins. That's a potential NCAA resume.
And the thing is, I mean, basically today was what a lot of coaches call a deposit in the RPI bank.
Yeah.
And it's not going to go away. And when strength of schedule is calculated, when RPI is calculated, when all those things are calculated, wins in November and December are as important as wins in February or March, and they all count the same. So this is important from that standpoint. And as far as the postseason goes, obviously, IU's got a lot of work to do, but the strength of schedule as the season goes along will help, because opponents come into play.
Yeah.
So everybody that Duke plays in the ACC, now that's an opponent's opponent for Indiana. Same thing with Louisville. Same thing now with Notre Dame. Same thing with the rest of the Big East, because they played Seton Hall. So the strength of schedule, I think sometimes people look at it early in the season and think that is what it is. It changes as the season goes on, especially as major conference teams play the rest of their schedules.
I want to make a quick correction. I keep forgetting we've already played two Big Ten games. If Indiana's 9-5 going into the January, there's only 16 more games, so a 10-8 means 9 more wins. It's confusing for a little brain like myself when you play these Big Ten games at a different time of year and then pick it back up. But there's still a pathway to 19 or 20 wins.
Yeah.
That's reasonable.
Right.
The Big Ten is not an outstanding. There's not a lot of outstanding teams outside of Michigan State this year. Purdue looks pretty good today, I must admit that. But it's a league that has some wins if you have your act together.
Yeah, I mean, outside of certainly Michigan State and Purdue, I think are playing at a level, when you look at how they played recently, that they're up at the top. With the way Minnesota's played at times, I think you look at them and say they're probably among the top 3, at least right now. But it's not a gauntlet, it's really not. And there are games that certainly you look at, you say, okay, if Indiana plays the way it did against Notre Dame, Indiana ought to have a successful home Big Ten season. Then the question becomes, can you steal 1 or 2 on the road? But at least I think the big thing is they got a key win. They made a deposit in the RPI bank. They beat a ranked team, a top 20 team. And they played at a level that says, okay, if they can replicate that, then they have a chance to do some other things.
They're giving themselves an opportunity, and we just didn't see it coming throughout the game. I didn't see it coming, I should say. But it's kind of been building. If you look at it, the way they hung in there with Louisville, the way they hung in there with Duke, and they just had things go their way down the stretch. They made the plays, and especially Jajuan Morgan. And Jeff, thanks. We got to get back to writing the postgame stories on this thrilling win, and I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas season, and look forward to covering Fort Wayne on Monday.
Should be a good time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.